Hey everyone, it's Jolt here. Over the past 2 months, I wrote a science fiction novel, but I didn't just write the novel. I created an entire framework around it from the initial idea through authoring of the manuscript through to the entire publication workflow. Take a look at this small clip from the Chapter 1 video.
Now, when people ask how I came to the buried curves, I begin with a classroom laughing at an ice line. That was 45 years ago.
Now, if you like the book, you can get the book on Amazon. It's already available for purchase, as well as you can go to Gumroad and get the book there. But today, I want to focus not so much on the book, but on my workflow for creating this. And I trust you will find this extremely interesting. I named the framework StoryOS, and this is a repeatable framework that you can also apply. But let's see how it all started. So it all started with a drive home from work. I usually take my bike to work, but this day I was driving because my bicycle was, I think, at the bike shop, but maybe it was a rainy day. I don't remember anymore. The point is, I was driving, and as I was driving home, I started this dialogue with ChatGPT that I want to take notes. And so I started to talk about my idea for the book. And you can see this just went on. And I had this long conversation with ChatGPT, as well as I had several different branches of this conversation as I started to ideate about the story I want to tell. But if you've ever tried to write anything long form with AI chat tools like ChatGPT, then you will find that there are many big problems with this. So first of all, AI forgets what was agreed. I had this long conversation with ChatGPT, but it constantly forgot things that we already agreed. And then, of course, it corrects itself that, oh, sorry, I remember, etc. No, it doesn't remember. It was outside the context window. It was forgotten. And it's super frustrating because you have a partner who constantly forgets what you've agreed. Also, there's an issue if you get through this. There's an issue with story continuity because you author chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, and they will not match each other. Whatever you do, it's going to be a constant struggle that the location changes, the names change, everything changes from chapter to chapter. And it's extremely hard to get AI to create something that has a meaningful arc, a meaningful continuation. And then, of course, I think what you will also find is AI is unable to come up with feelings that matter to us as humans. And AI comes up with a world that is not believable because it's full of errors. So that was the entire idea. And so as I was thinking, I got excited with this chat. And as I was thinking about how to work this book, I thought that maybe I need to treat this as a programming project. And when you're writing software, then you end up with many, many files. So essentially, this is the Obsidian Excalibur plugin, and these are the different functions and files within the Excalibur plugin project. And you can see here that this is actually like long form writing. You have different folders. In the folders, you have files, and each file is essentially a chapter or a scene that describes what the project, what the application needs to do at that time. And at the end, then I want to make this into something that you can run in Obsidian as the Obsidian Excalibur plugin. I need to run a build command, and that is going to create the main JS file, which is a single bundled file that then you can install in Obsidian and it runs. But the point I want to highlight here is that in programming, you divide the program into many individual files, and these tools, these AI tools, are super efficient with that. Also, the big benefit of environments and what you're looking at here right now is Visual Studio Code of these environments is if you make a modification, let's say I delete this line from the code, then these projects are stored in a so-called Git repository, and I can click on the changes that happened in my current revision, and I can look at what those changes were, but I can also go and look at my historical changes. And for example, here, I can take a look at this, that in this case, this is what I changed in the code, or maybe this is more interesting. If I come to here, then you can see that I can navigate my project back in the history. So down here, I can see my so-called commits. Each time I make changes to my code, they land here. And each time a change is made, I can verify what's happening. And why is this important? Why am I showing you this boring software code here? It's important because the big problem, as far as I found with ChatGPT, is it starts to forget stuff. It starts to remove stuff. Maybe it didn't even forget it. Maybe it just deleted it from its memory, because for ChatGPT, it wasn't important, but for me it was. And if I have ChatGPT work on my book project in a similar structure as my application projects like Obsidian Excalidraw, then I will have control over it. I will see what is changing in my book from commit to commit, from change to change, and I can track it. So that's what I set out to do. I wanted to create this project, and let me show you how the end result looks like, and then we'll dive into the details. In the end, I created this StoryOS framework where you can see that I have the vision for the book, I have the description of the world. Within the world, I have all sorts of files about climate and culture, etc. I have characters. I have here also supporting characters. Each character has its own ID as well as their description. My main character has a much longer description of who he or she is. Then I have all sorts of other elements here. For example, I have calendars. I also have mysteries. I have a story arc. I have lots of things. I have all these scenes here. So you can see here my book is divided into scenes. And this, everything is handled in a Git repository, just like a program code. And I can always come back here and I can look at some of the changes that I made to the book, and I can look at this now. In this case, actually, I mean, you can see here I was doing some editing on chapter 41, and you can see the changes I made to chapter 41 or chapter 42. So you can see some of these edits as well. But the bottom line is I created this framework where I can create a book. And so this is what I'm going to show you today, how this framework works, how I can create a coherent project and then generate prose, generate the EPUB, the PDF, the audiobook, video book, and can generate translations as well. So let me take you through that journey. Now, if we move on, this is my high-level bookmaking workflow. It all starts with an idea and plan, and that's my conversation with ChatGPT. It's really first you need to ideate about the plot, about the world, about the characters you want to build. Then, once I have this overall idea, then I start to build the various characters, locations, customs, all sorts of details that are important for building the world. because one of the things I learned as I was doing my research into how to write a good story was from Brendan Sanderson, who said that you shouldn't be really innovating in the story arc or story plot, if you will. There are a couple of story plots that work. What you should be innovating on are characters and the world, and how you make those characters relatable to the reader. So world building is an important part. Then I developed my scenes. So each of the scenes becomes scene files. Then from this, I can generate the prose. From the prose, I can do my editing. Of course, there's a feedback loop, because as I edit and validate, echoes the book that I wrote went through at least 3 or 4 completely different versions. So I started with an idea. I thought that's going to be interesting. I generated the book. I listened to it and I said, oh boy, this is unbearable, boring, and it's a bad book. So I went back and I did some research, what makes a good story, and then I started to add those elements and started to rework the story until I thought that I have a good story, which I actually think. I think Echoes is a good story. I really highly encourage you to check it out. But that's in terms of workflow. You have the validations and edits. And at the end, I have a couple of workflows that automatically generates the EPUB, the audiobook, and all these other components. And so what does StoryOS provide to you in all of this? Well, you can think of StoryOS as this engine, and it gives you a framework for storing your knowledge. Human in the loop means that you have the Git repository that allows you to validate at each point what is changing. You have various AI agents, and we'll talk about those later on, that help you with developing your story. You have all sorts of validation and quality check scripts that help you validate that the story is continuous, that there are all sorts of validation rules. I won't go into details right now, because then this is going to be a very long video. And StoryOS is also modular. It's flexible, and that is achieved by focusing the stories on scenes. And this allows you to reshuffle the story in the end. And if you look at my manuscript, you will see that the scene numbering, because I was using a fixed scene number. So if I created a scene, the scene got an ID. Let me show you here. So you can see here that each of my scenes has an ID 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. And then when I'm creating a chapter, so let's look at some of my chapters. I'm going to look at chapter 1 here. Okay, it starts with scene 01, then it continues scene 02, scene 03. So far the beginning of the book actually didn't change that much. There was 4, 5. But then I think here, if we move, then chapter 2 continues with scene 21. And then I have 22. And then I have scene 27. So you can see here that some of these scenes jumped around. And then in chapter 3, we're back to scene 07 and then 09. So you can see that these scenes, as I'm reshuffling scene 12, as I'm reshuffling the book, the scenes, how they end up in the book, and I have this book index. I think this is maybe an easier way to look at this. If you look here, then you will see that chapter 1 is the first 6 scenes in series. Then you have 21, 22, 27. Then you have scene 7, 9, 12, 8. Then 13, 14, 15, scene 111, then 16. So it's clear that here I saw a gap in the story, and so on. So this is the basic idea of how, if you have scenes, that gives you that flexibility that later on you can use those scenes as puzzle pieces to put together your story. And so if we move on with this, what are the elements of StoryOS? How did I overcome this issue that AI constantly drifts in the story and is unable to create, a meaningful story from our perspective? And so I have lots of components in my StoryOS in my book, and each of these are represented with one and sometimes dozens or even hundreds of files. Of course, I have a vision for the book. It's called a story Bible, which outlines the big outline of the story. I have different files to describe the world, like customs, like climate, like all sorts of stuff. I have calendars for the characters. What I found that unless I give a calendar and each of the scenes that you're reading in the book is pinned to a date, AI gets confused. But if there's a calendar, then 5 days later, 2 days before, it was a Wednesday and we don't work on Sunday, whatever, these sort of rules can be applied because AI can pin it to a date. The same with locations. So my locations outline cities and the distance between cities. It also describes the means of transportation as well as the length of the journey on average. And there are all sorts of parameters that helps AI understand that from the home to the office is 4 tram stops and it's 20 minutes. From one city to the other is 90 minutes because it's 25 minutes on tram, then 10 minutes waiting for the train and what have you, and so on. I have the characters, I already mentioned that. I have files that describe the voice of characters, because you want each of the characters to feel different, and the way you achieve it is you define that voice. You also give phrases to characters that they want to sometimes say, so it feels like that character is speaking. I created scenes. We already looked at how scenes make this whole thing modular. Reader knowledge and character knowledge are super important parts of this story, because reader knowledge is, for every scene, I define the reader knowledge, so we can actually look at here, how does an actual scene look like? So here's what you see in a scene, and maybe we can just look at this in preview mode as well. So you can see here, this is scene ID 003, title Elias in the control room, and then you can see here location detail, you can see the scene goal, what do I want to achieve in the scene, what type of hook the scene is going to end on. And then you can see here location. I have actually locations are linked, and these are wiki links, because at first I thought I'm going to be using Obsidian to manage the manuscript, but actually I ended up with Visual Studio Code only, and so on. You can see here the foreshadowing and some research references that ground the story in actual research I did around the book. And then, you can see here lots of parameters. This is what I call the scene contract. And it's a long contract with all of these bits and pieces that define how the scene should be authored. And then I have symbols, and also I have various review processes. Some of them are automated. As you see, there are links to various facts, so those can be actually automated. And then all of this is supported by agents, by various skills, automation scripts, and workflows. And the way you can imagine this is, in this case, you're the conductor. you're managing a workflow. You plan, draft, review, execute, and publish your book. And you're conducting this orchestra of tools. Agents, they are the people or the robots that help you, and an agent has a role description. You have scripts. Scripts are automated machinery, for example, machinery to generate the audiobook or to check consistency, to create all sorts of indexes and reports. You have skills, which are actual expertise of how you need to perform the task. You have different tasks and you have a set of templates. Again, let me just show you how this looks like. So if I come here, let's close these. And if I come here to my StoryOS, then you can see here I have agents. I have the architect, the architecture critic, I have the audiobook narrator, I have the continuity reviewer, the planner, the image prompt writer. I have all of these agents. And an agent is nothing really surprising. These are all markdown files with a description of that agent. So you can see here, this describes the purpose of the agents, keep the science and history load-bearing enough to sustain reader trust without letting research become the point of the book. By the way, this was one of the learnings about the plot, that if something is too scientifically accurate, it becomes extremely boring. Because then you're reading a science book. So lots of stuff here. Then I have my scripts, lots of scripts here, and you can see here all sorts of things. We're going to quickly later on generate a repository export. So that's one script that we can run. But for example, I have render book, and render book is going to generate all of the outputs for the book, the PDF, the EPUB, the TXT, etc. And so on. You can see here I have lots of different scripts created for different automated activities. Then I have skills, develop character, develop scene, emotional review, human drama review, mystery review. These are different focused reviews of the chapter or the scene that I've created. The same story. You have a goal, and then you have a description of how that skill is performed. And then I have tasks. For example, review story arc. It defines what the task is. And there's a definition of this. Again, you can see here, I have lots of tasks here. Generate research, outline scene, reconcile external patch, reconcile scene metadata, etc. Write scene, write chapter, write afterword. These are all different type of tasks that need to be done. And finally, I have templates. I have a template for the chapter, for the character, for the location, for the movement, for questions, for research, etc., for scenes, for the theme, that help with consistency. So that's essentially the orchestra that you're conducting, and the story is a new. You're using these tools with various agents to create that. And so what did all of this cost? Well, essentially, this is all the out-of-the-pocket money I spent on this. I really wanted to give Code a try. So that was an underlying motive here. I was looking for a project that's not a software project where I can try Code. And then I also wanted to try Codex from GPT. So I use Codex as well. I used Gemini text to speech, but Google Cloud offers you a $300 initial bonus when you sign up. So that was completely sufficient, generating the audio for my book one go. So that's about 9 hours of audio, costs around about $25 worth of credit. So for $300, I had plenty of time to experiment. So that was the out of the pocket money. Visual Studio Code is a free tool. I was using Pandoc, Calibra, PDF, libjs, FFmpeg to organize the automations. Then I'm publishing to Amazon using the Kindle Direct Publishing. I used 11 Labs Reader. You get 10 hours per month free listening because my review workflow is to generate the chapters and then listen to it, take notes, and come back and modify either the scene or the setup of the book and then listen to it again. So for that reason, a quick approach is to use 11 Labs Reader. But of course, because I had lots of Gemini credits, I also sometimes just generated the book using Gemini, but generating the book is not very fast. So it takes at least 4 or 5 hours to create all the audio for this book. So it's not something quick, and 11 Labs Reader is pretty quick. And so I think before we come here, let me just show you how all of this comes together and how you would use this. So now what I'm going to show you is this is the project, but I'm actually going to do something else here. I'm going to first check out StoryOS. So now I'm switching my project to the empty StoryOS, and here you can see there's nothing in here. The locations are empty, everything is empty except for, of course, the agents, and the underlying machinery is here. And now if I want to write a book, I want to get started with a book, I can do two things. I can either open, and now I have Codex and GitHub Copilot here. I don't have Cloud Code set up because my 1 month ran out, and I personally concluded that I like Codex better. It's cheaper, more powerful, and overall gave me a better experience than Cloud Code. Cloud Code was not bad either, so it was fun working with Cloud Code and Sonnet 5, but I found Codex to be much more strong. But here, if I want to write a book, I open Codex, and I think Luna is going to be good. I think I'm going to give it a medium strength for now, and yeah, help me write a book. And let's see what's going to happen. So Codex now has access to StoryOS, and it starts with an orientation of the entire book project. And then you can see here that it's doing its thing. It's discovering, what it's discovering is some of these initial files. So probably it found agents MD, and then it most probably found welcome, and welcome describes a checklist here, how you want to do it. And indeed, so what kind of book would you like to write? Who is it about? What problem, danger, desire drives the story? What tone should it have? And here I can start to respond. And as I respond, it is going to start to create my book files in here. So I want to write a thriller about AI going rogue. So you can imagine this process, and you get all these questions, and as it starts to create items, it will start to commit it to different files. I won't go on here because this is going to take a long time, but hopefully you get the idea. And now coming back to this, I think on top of all what I've said in terms of writing a story, and StoryOS is amazing at giving you that opportunity to focus on the creative aspect of writing, and it overcomes the underlying issues with writing with AI, that the story comes out continuous and meaningful. I think there are two additional opportunities that my workflow opens, and I'm actually using already both of them. So the first one is, this is actually a new way of reading. You know, the story that I created with StoryOS is a story I wanted to read for such a long time. This has been on my mind for years now, but I don't have the time and I don't have the skills to write it. But now, with this framework, I was actually able to create the book and then listen to the audiobook, and it was such a joy, as well as such a new experience in terms of listening to a book that I created, but of course, in the details, in terms of how the prose in the end comes out of AI, there's lots of surprise. Of course, I know the entire story, I know the characters, I created all the parameters in setting up the story, but still, the way it comes out in the end is amazing, and then you can share it with others. And I think this is such a beautiful new way of experiencing and creating stories. And again, I just want to encourage you to indeed check out the audiobook on Gumroad and the book on Amazon. I'm going to have the links in the description below. I think this is a good book, and I'm selling it for just a few dollars, so it's really not a barrier to get the book, and I don't really want to make big money on this. But I thought, okay, we need to make it a meaningful exchange. I do need to ask some money because I personally don't believe in the value of free giveaways. But so that's one thing where I think StoryOS comes to the picture. The other bit where I think StoryOS is super interesting is it's actually not just for books. So on the back of the StoryOS framework, at work, I work at a big corporate company, and I started to create this AI agent using GitHub Copilot and the same Visual Studio Code and Markdown setup to create, to move away from a knowledge archive to a self-learning knowledge repository. I created a set of agents who are actually able to ask questions from experts in the organization via email. They store what they learn in a file structure that they manage. It's all stored on corporate SharePoint. It's exported into SharePoint as a wiki, etc. So it became a fully corporate thing, but at the heart of it, it's actually the same structure, the same logic as StoryOS. So why am I saying this? Because I think if you get this set up, this is far more than just creating story, or this is about far more than just creating stories. You can use it for automating, of course, your own personal knowledge management system, or you can create an enterprise knowledge repository, or you can write books, and so on and so on. It's, I think, super powerful. And so finally, I want to close here that I'm very excited about StoryOS, and I thought just sharing StoryOS as a repository might not be enough for everyone. I am sharing the repository. You'll find the link to Gumroad, and you can download the repository and you can create your own story with it. But if you want some help, if you want some shared commitment or commitment partners as you develop it, then I encourage you to sign up for this once in a lifetime cohort. I call it the StoryOS cohort. This is more of an AI automation masterclass. I'm not a writer, I'm not an author, so don't come to me for expert advice on how to create stories. Of course, I have my ideas and I can do my research, but so can you as well. But what I can give you is hands-on support in making StoryOS work. And yeah, if you looked at the date on the initial chat I showed you, that was 2 days less than, actually 3 days less than 2 months ago. So it was 24th of June. Today is 21st of August. So I actually delivered the book, including the creation of the framework and lots of trial and error, in 2 months. So I think actually in these 2 months, from October until November, it is possible to write and publish a book. So if you're interested, this is the cohort. Links are in the video description to sign up. And this is how the 8 weeks are going to be organized. We'll start with setting up your framework and starting to work on ideas. Then we work on the characters, scene planning, start to author the first chapters, the full manuscript. We'll look at editing, building outputs and images and publishing. Now, don't look at this outline as a fixed curriculum. I'm going to be flexible also in the sense that if by week 8 we are not at the end, then we might have week 9 and week 10 as well. I'm going to be there to help you and to work together with you to create the story. Yeah, so if you're interested, do try this out. Otherwise, follow the links in the description below to read my book, to listen to the audiobook, to listen to the video book. I actually have translations. So using the framework, I translated in German, Spanish, French, Hungarian, Japanese, Dutch, Russian, and Chinese. So I created a whole bunch of translations, and each of those are available as EPUB and PDF on Gumroad, so you can get the book. The audiobook currently is only English. Of course, using this framework, it is possible to create the audiobook in the other languages. I haven't yet had the time or the energy, but if there's high demand for one or the other, then yeah, I'm open to creating additional audiobooks. Now, the translations are machine translations. The original text was generated in English and it reads super nice in English. I read the Hungarian translation, or not read it, but just sampled it, and it's so-so. I wasn't fully happy with it, but it's sort of okay. Maybe other languages are easier. I would guess that, yeah, you will see. So I'm not going to guess. I'm not familiar with how different languages translate from English to the other language, but if the logic of the language is similar, then I guess the translation is easier. Hungarian has a very different language logic, and as consequence, the sentence structures, etc., are very hard to translate. That's all I wanted to share with you today. I am super excited. And again, if you found this interesting, check out Echoes on Amazon or check out the links below. It's available in all of the Amazon stores. You can also get it in paperback. I ordered my paperback, but it hasn't yet arrived, so I cannot show you that right now. And thank you for taking the time to listen to this video. See you in the next one.